Good evening, everyone. My name is Sue Ann Hung, and I'm the president and CEO for the Center for Asian Pacific American Women. Welcome to day 3 of the Multicultural Women's Conference. We just had a great panel on COVID-19, and we had an incredible day yesterday, including the mentoring session sponsored by APIA Scholars and Wells Fargo. I hope you'll take the opportunity to join us tomorrow night for the second mentoring session. I want to thank the steering committee, OCA Advocate and the Greater DC Chapter, Boys and Girls Club of America Native Services, Alvanza, VMT Consulting, and Women's Entrepreneurial Opportunity Project. I also want to thank our community partners, APIA Scholars and National ACE, as well as our corporate sponsors, AARP, ADP, Walmart, and UPS. As I have had conversations with people of all ages and all aspects of their career, key area of conversation, especially for multicultural women, is in the area of building their self-confidence and listening to their inner voice. Low self-esteem can negatively impact virtually every facet of your life, including your relationships, your job, and your health. We have an expert group of panelists tonight to provide a session called Listen to Your Inner Voice, Building Your Self-Confidence, and Trust Your Instincts. So let me now introduce our moderator for the evening, Suprita Vetmasi, National Senior Managing Director for AAPI Alliances at Teach for America.
Thank you so much, Sue-Ann, for that warm introduction and for creating these spaces over this past week. It has been such a joy to get to engage in this space. And I'm excited particularly to talk about building our self-confidence, listening to our inner voice. Today, I have with me, to what Sue-Ann was saying, an expert group of folks who are excited to be here. We have Jennifer Reese Polson, who's the founder and chief Empowerment Officer at Powerhouse Strong, Kim Funsai Thong, who is a personal trainer with Phoenix Waves LLC, and Triana Brown, the two-time Miss Oklahoma 2019 and 2017, and Miss USA second runner-up. Welcome to the space, y'all. It's good to see your faces. Like I said, I'm really excited to be in conversation with all of you, and for all the folks who are out there watching right now. This topic in particular around listening to our inner voice, building our self-confidence, it's really important to me as somebody who had an inner voice that wasn't always telling me great things about myself. I dug into where that inner voice may have been coming from and the messages I might have been getting in society that was telling me otherwise, and started to really shift that perception of myself. So I'm excited to have y'all introduce yourselves to our audience tonight and share a little bit about who you are and what you're bringing into the space. And Jennifer, if you could start us off.
Certainly. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Reese Polson. I was born and raised in London, England, and I moved to Atlanta 17 years ago, quite a long time. I'm the founder of Powerhouse Strong, which is an empowerment program that builds confidence in girls and women to live life to its fullest without the fear of a threat to their personal safety. It also develops the courage to be free from the fear of speaking up and speaking out. The mission of the Powerhouse Strong program is to educate and empower all girls and women to live safe, healthy, and active lives by teaching them how to use their basic human skills for protection. And I wear many hats. I am also a mum. That's my greatest role. My greatest role is being mum to my 2 children who are adults themselves now. And I'm also the current president of the British American Business Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you so much. Kim, could you introduce yourself? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry, I was on mute. Hey, I am Christine Fansai Thong, known as Kim. Born in Lagos, Nigeria, raised in Queens, New York. I basically was an RN for about 9 years, and currently I am a personal trainer. I train all ranges from everybody from with special needs who suffered any kind of neurologic disorder, those that are senior citizens, children, all aspects basically. And my whole goal is to train and teach everybody that there's an athlete and everybody and anybody has ability. So, and I have 3 girls on my own, ages, oh gosh, 11, 13, and 15. And I have a husband in the Air Force. So we're currently based here in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Bring us home, Triana.
Hello, everyone. My name is Triana Brown. I'm a working actress and model. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I come from a multicultural family, so I am Chickasaw tribe. I'm African American and Caucasian. I'm a 2-time Miss Oklahoma, so I won Miss Oklahoma 2017 and went to Miss America 2018, and then became the first woman in Oklahoma to win another major title, where I became Miss Oklahoma USA 2019, and went to Miss USA in 2019, becoming Miss USA second runner-up. But during that entire journey, I created my own nonprofit called Bridging the Great Cultural Divide, which is all about nurturing cultural compassion and celebrating our cultural differences in order to eliminate cultural divisiveness. So I've traveled over 120,000 miles within the state and have expanded that outside of Oklahoma, getting to travel and make those uncomfortable conversations a bit more comfortable.
Thank you so much, all of you, again, for being here. I am so excited to be in this space, especially as somebody who is constantly looking to strong women in my life to show me the pathway that they've taken, and like to build my own confidence in that. Really excited to dig into this. And I know y'all all touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about how your background and heritage influenced your way of navigating through your life and or your career. Jennifer, I'd love for you to start us off, and then Kim and Triana to come in afterwards.
Yeah, of course. Well, I like new adventures, and I like exploring. I'm a naturally curious person, and I think I've always been like that way since I was a child. I always like to think outside of the box. So I'm always open to new opportunities and challenges. And even when I look at my resume, the jobs that I've been involved in are so varied and quite different from each other. So it's no surprise that I ended up putting together an empowerment program for females. And my background is in martial arts. So I have that unbreakable spirit and perseverance. So whenever I've been knocked down, and believe me, it's happened many times, I've gotten back up and gotten back up stronger. And I always say that a black belt is a white belt that never gave up, and that's pretty much how I lead my life. That's the short answer.
Okay, so I myself, I grew up in a strong Filipino household, though I was raised in New York. And being Filipino, I was, spoken to in our language, though I did speak English in school. And so I grew up in a household also, with everybody in my family being in a medical field, that, I was raised upon the notion of becoming a doctor. My mom's a doctor, my uncle, my aunts. So, that's what I was raised upon, that I thought I had to be financially stable, and then I had to be secure in my career. So that's what I thought I should become. And the transition was hard because that's what was my train of thought. And in school, growing up, I knew that I had to do well in school because, there are certain grades, because being Asian, that you have to maintain a certain GPA. So that's, growing up, I had to become that, not necessarily what I thought that I should become and what I should do, but that's how I was raised. Yeah.
Well, a little bit about myself. I was raised in a single parent household, so my father was not around, but my mother was basically Wonder Woman. She was my mom and dad. And she was really great at being able to keep that relationship with my father and I positive. So when I did get to know him, there really wasn't any animosity there other than, the initial, why did you leave? But on top of that, being in a mixed household gave me a really unique lens to view life from because my mother is predominantly African American. And that's how she has always associated herself as, even though she is multiracial herself. And then my father typically describes himself as a Caucasian man, even though we do have his father is Native and his mother's Native. Um, and we are associated with the Chickasaw tribe. But because I came from a household or a lifestyle where I had to grow up this way and then was put into another lifestyle like this, I was able to remain middle ground on many topics. And although I didn't know that I would get into pageants later in life, which consisted a lot of being in mixed crowds, I was able to have those conversations, with people because of the things that I learned in those households. And when I did develop that relationship with my family, they may have viewed everything on my father's side one way and the complete opposite in the other. So what's something really unique and special about my background is that I'm able to really just kind of be a chameleon, I guess you could say, just kind of like put myself in a crowd and be able to connect no matter where you've come from. And that ultimately helped me when it came to bridging the great cultural divide and when it came down to running for Miss USA and running for Miss America. Because when you're running for those titles, you're not just representing one crowd, you're representing all.
Thanks so much for sharing a little bit more about that from all of you. I love the threads and the polls, both to like your families, your identities, your inner self-confidence, and even in the ways that you were talking about your communities and how that environment has impacted you, especially on the ways y'all are navigating your life. Kim, I can relate so much to I'm Laotian American, so my parents definitely had ideas about me going into the medical field. I did not, but we'll talk a little bit more about the messages that we get about where our path should go, who we should be. And I appreciate hearing that thread that y'all each had in there. As we start thinking about then how we actually push ourselves into these pathways, how we feel confident to go toward them, even if there are folks in our family who are telling us, yes, go for it, or maybe don't go for it, or I've never seen anyone who looks like me doing this at all. How do I go for it? I'm curious if y'all have ever experienced imposter syndrome. And if so, can you share what happened and how did you manage through that while preserving your authentic self? And for folks actually out there who are listening, if you have not heard of imposter syndrome, it was originally called imposter phenomenon. Imposter syndrome, as it's now usually called, is not commonly understood as a false and sometimes crippling belief that one's successes are the product of luck or fraud rather than skill. So I'd love to hear, Triana, starting with you, if this is something that you experienced, how you navigated that.
Yeah, definitely experienced it within the most recent years, getting into a career like pageants. I grew up as an athlete. I was training for Tokyo 2020 until I got injured. And then when my mother lost her job, I needed some financial assistance where I saw a pageant and I ended up winning and was able to pay off student loans and things like that. But to keep it really short, I've experienced two different versions of it. And I never knew it was imposter syndrome until we were initially having this discussion. Quite honestly, I always wondered what this feeling was. When I competed for Miss Oklahoma, I worked incredibly hard to get there, to go from basically being a jock to being a pageant woman. When I won, basically, and essentially as a rookie, there were so many people who were saying, she only won because she talked about race. And she only won because they haven't had a woman that looks like her win. And although I knew going into it that I was working hard and there was a chance of winning, after winning, the outside sources of people and the negativity that they were voicing to me put me in a position where I was like, maybe I shouldn't have gotten this. Maybe I doubted every little bit about myself and almost in a way self-sabotaged my direction, you know, to go when going to Miss America, and ultimately didn't go being myself. And the outcome showed it completely. And then the other perspective was when I chose to compete for Miss Oklahoma USA, it was a chance to prove myself because I didn't do as well at Miss America. I wanted to have more of a positive outcome, which can happen in imposter syndrome. It can be a motivation. So on my way to Miss USA, I worked so hard and in a completely different way than how I prepared for Miss America, but it motivated me in a different way completely. It wasn't a way of like self-doubt. I knew that I was capable at this point, and no matter what people said, I didn't listen at that point. And it showed at the end. It really did show. Being second runner-up is a huge accomplishment. But yeah, I've definitely experienced imposter syndrome in a way. And I've had both perspectives I think that you can really have, which is that negative and positive way that it can kind of push you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate you two sharing that, like, oh, I didn't even realize that it was a thing until we were having a discussion about it being a thing. And I definitely know it shows up differently based on our identities as well, and who may we be around. Jennifer, I'd love to hear your take on this, if you've experienced this and how you navigated or managed through it, if you have.
My answer is very short. It would be no. And actually, to be honest, I hadn't actually heard of imposter syndrome until recently, possibly because I feel like I've never experienced it, but at least I'm not conscious of experiencing it, because I believe that I work very hard to achieve anything that I do. And so when I achieve success, I truly believe that I deserve it. I persevere at everything that I do, no matter what it is. And to fulfill my passions and my purpose. And yeah, the honest answer is I don't think I have, but again, I'm not conscious of that. So my answer would be no.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, we're definitely here to share so many different experiences about how things may impact us and all that, and all of that. I'm curious, like, Kim, when you think about that, how does that show up for you, if it shows up?
So imposter syndrome, I myself didn't understand the meaning of it, nor did I know the word, what it meant actually. Again, I had to work hard, even though despite when I applied for a nursing school and I took the exam, and despite my mom knowing everybody in the school, the teachers, the president, and everything like that, I wasn't able to get in with her knowing them. I had to take exam just like everybody else. I had to take I had to meet the chairman, the counselors, and everything like that. It wasn't just handed over to me. I had to work really hard for it. And so throughout the whole my nursing career, everything I had to work hard for. Nothing was ever given to me, especially being 5 feet tall, not that tall. So being 5 feet tall and being one of the youngest, I started nursing when I was 20 years old. So it was just a lot that I had to work with, being the young one, being a new grad, working in nights. If anybody works nights as a nurse, they know that they usually put all the seniors and usually one new grad. And it was hard for me. And then transitioning later on as a personal trainer, again, it was a big challenge for me as well, because I had to kind of like show up for myself rather than, it was all about certifications, but it's also about displaying yourself. I mean, like, as society puts it, you have to look a certain way, and it's so sad, but that's the way it is. And that's why I believe that, when you do start going to taking care of yourself fitness wise, everybody's journey is going to be different. Everybody chooses when and how they start. And I believe that everybody should have, you know, they should be confident in what they do necessarily. And like when you start your whole fitness journey and everything, it's hard because everybody looks at you a certain way, and it's just not, it's not given like that. I mean, you honestly, everybody has a story. Everybody has to work hard. So that's where I come from.
Yeah, appreciate that. I also see here in the chat, are proud of sharing that imposter syndrome is common in women and people of color. You know, and I think like we see that play out in many ways. I actually I think I shared with y'all when we were talking about like, oh, how do we want to talk about this topic? We were like kind of on the spectrum of like our, you know, familiarity with it and also how we experience it with ourselves. And I had mentioned one of my colleagues had said about imposter syndrome is that maybe it's not that you are an imposter, but that you are part of an imposter system that makes you feel like the outcomes that you have maybe are not deserved for you, or maybe they are, depending on that background, that identity. And so I appreciate hearing the different ways y'all came to it, especially for some of y'all who were like, oh, I've never heard this term before, because grappling with new terms, it's also hard when we're trying to even like feel our own self-confidence and learn new things and go through stuff. And so thanks for sharing that vulnerably with everyone here. I'm going to do a quick Q&A check to see if we got any questions from the audience here. All right. If anyone does have questions, feel free to submit them in the Facebook comments, or if you are on Zoom with us, feel free to pop a question into the Q&A box, and I will check that again later on, but we'll keep moving here. I'd love to hear about what experiences each of you have had in your career that impacted your self-confidence, either positively or negatively, or maybe a combo. What did you do because of that? Kim, I'd love to start with you.
So basically, like I said, I was a nurse for 9 years of my life. And you may be thinking, who was a nurse? Yes, I was a nurse for 9 years, but then I suffered a massive stroke when I was 31. So that really shot my confidence, because being a nurse, I was at the height of my career, but then having a stroke, I had to restart everything in terms of learning how to crawl, learning how things that we take for granted, like walking, talking, seeing. So even my thought process till this day is still kind of like, so eloquently, I like to speak eloquently. I try my best, but sometimes the words that are in my brain doesn't come out to my mouth. And it's frustrating in a sense. So it was hard to rebuild myself when I started my whole fitness journey and becoming a personal trainer. It wasn't something that I decided, yes, I'm going to become a physical personal trainer. It was only because I was in rehab for about 5 years. And when I was in rehab, I really saw the struggle that everybody faced, and how that you try to rebuild yourself and it's shot so many times, but it's how you build yourself back up, right? So at that time when I was in rehab, that's when my husband said to me, you know, you're working so hard on yourself, why don't you become a personal trainer? I said, are you crazy? I can't even walk. I said, how can I become a personal trainer? But then I saw that, you know, through discipline and through building my self-confidence, that, you know, little by little, step by step, I was able to do so. And that has showed me that I can project that and give that to other people, that, you know, they can see the ability within themselves and not necessarily always look at the downfall, because we're going to have our ups and downs, but it's how we get through it, how we get through everything in life.
Thanks so much for sharing that. I also want to just say that in the chat, you've had some affirmations here of admiration. So I just want to make sure I lift that up for you. Triana, how would you respond to this?
So experiences that I've had in my career, well, I think I could say that I've had both positive and negative, just because when you put yourself on a platform like that, you're opening up opportunities for people to really just voice their opinions on you, whether they are positive or negative. But in order for me to gain self-confidence, I had to go through those low points. So when it all began, I relate everything to pageantry because that's when my life kind of changed and a lot of doors opened up and I was challenged in a lot of ways, whether it be career or just growth internally. But what impacted me the most for self-confidence in a positive way was to just stay on the positive stuff, was that I had to sit down a lot by myself and just really evaluate where I was just mentally and emotionally so that I wouldn't be affected by those who may not even know me, but they have some strong opinion about me. And where I am now, as far as where my career goes, it was all based off of those low points. It was based off of the people who would say whatever it was that they wanted to say about me. It was the people who would call me out for my race and say I only won because I was mixed or because it was the time for it, for pageantry. And when really I had put so much work into it, it was just that day the judges chose me. And I couldn't change anything about that. It's a competition, Then you go to an international level where you are susceptible to scrutiny from all over the world by that point. I had to really be confident in who I was, where I came from. I had to even ask myself questions like, why is blue my favorite color? Just so that I could know myself fully from inside and out, from the beginning of my time to where I am right now. So if there's anything that I can say, if you are in a point in your life where you feel like there's a lot of negativity happening, it's just stay strong, because really it's temporary. It will be temporary. And the person that you will become at the end is the person that you've always dreamed of being, really. And who I am now is not who I was a year ago or who I was 2 years ago. So a lot of times whenever I think about that, I'm like, thank you to all of the, I guess you'd call haters or whatever you'd say. I say thank you to those people who said those negative things about me, because I'm accomplishing everything I've ever wanted to accomplish because of those words. I'm not saying it's okay, but I'm just saying that where I am now, that just was a rapid fire to put me where I am and succeeding in life right now.
I just love hearing that, because Jennifer, before I move on to you, it's also just like telling where a reframe of a negative moment can really like push us in a different way, or in a path that we actually were like, oh, I'm about to do what I wanted to do. Look at me go. Jennifer, what about you? How's your experiences in your career?
I think I'd have to talk about the effects that the pandemic, that COVID has had on my work. That was the first thing that sprung to my mind when when you gave us the question. And I've been dedicated with my work for years, for 10 years. And as any of you will know, putting a business together, it's hard work. It's not easy at all. It's quite a challenge. And the program that I put together had been gaining momentum. I had to hit rock bottom so many times in the first few years that it's, rock bottom became, a place of travel for me in a way. It was always where I ended up, and but I always got myself out of it. And then so the program started to gain momentum over the years. And then, and I've educated thousands of girls and women, and all of a sudden, boom, gone. And it was devastating. My whole world was spinning. I didn't know where to turn. But what it did, it forced me. So that was the negative, but the positive, what it did was force me to find another way of teaching, and another way to continue my passion when I knew that I couldn't be couldn't do in-person events. And the nature of my program is that really it works best when you're doing in-person events. So I had to adapt my curriculum extremely quickly to teach on a virtual platform. And it was a real challenge, especially the nature of the work, because while it's emotional and psychological, there's a physical component. It's the martial arts aspect of it. And that's kind of difficult to teach virtually. But I did manage to adapt that program. It does need tweaking still, but now I have a way of reaching girls and women anywhere in the world, whereas before I was unable to do that unless I physically traveled around. But now I can do it from one spot and do that through Zoom. So that's kind of a positive thing that came out of it. And that's very empowering, from my self-confidence being knocked when I lost all my work to then now suddenly feeling empowered and confident. My confidence levels are soaring now, because it's like, wow, the whole world is open to me in a way that I didn't think it was before. So that's kind of a positive that's come out of that negative.
Thank you all so much for sharing those, because I really do feel like there's so many moments where we could get up against the wall, or whatever our proverbial wall is for ourselves, and feel like, this is my low point. What am I going to do with this? And then to hear you all like take moments to like turn that around and then still show up and really show up for yourselves in really like confident and profound ways. I'm just feeling really inspired by that. So I just want to give y'all that affirmation. And if y'all are on the Zoom, there's some affirmations for you in the chat too. Take a moment to look. I'm just going to take a quick check. Let me just see. There was a quick question that did come up in the chat. Kim, did you write a book about your experience? If so, folks would love to read.
No, I never actually wrote a book about my experience, though I was asked, and I did think about it. At that time, not that long ago, I wasn't ready to share my experience, because it was very debilitating, both mentally and physically for me. But now I look at it as something that is weird to say, but something I'm so grateful for that has happened, because yes, you would never wish upon anybody to have a stroke. But in a sense, it made me who I am. I'm so much stronger than I was before. The way I look at everything, and the way I view things, it's just everything. I mean, when I see the people, I truly actually see the person themselves rather than them just a physical being. When somebody has a bad day, I literally just let it kind of just brush off my shoulders, because you don't know their story. They could be having a bad day. They had a bad life, or is experiencing something, so I try to always see that life is totally different for everybody, and just try to make the best of your own, because tomorrow's never guaranteed. The next second, the next minute. So yeah, well, that's my answer in a long. That was long.
Well, when you start to write that, please put me on the pre-order list for that book. No, but I really appreciate you sharing that too, because what I'm hearing from that is that it also takes a lot of empathy, not just for others, but for ourselves when we're in these moments that we feel low, where to rebuild our self-confidence in ways that like we might need to use new techniques, we might need to reach for new tools or different communities. And y'all have touched on this a little bit in each of your stories, and I am curious to hear you dig into it more, how or if you've ever felt vulnerable, where you felt discriminated against or felt less than as you are getting on this journey to being where you are now. Can you share an example of how you might have handled that situation and how you navigated it? Jennifer, I'd love to start with you and hear
Yes.
a little bit beyond this.
Yeah, well, there's been a time when I felt extremely vulnerable, and that time, and vulnerable and less than, and that was after my divorce 12 years ago. Before that, I thought I had it all together, everything was absolutely fine, and suddenly I didn't recognize myself, and that that really was quite a blow for me, especially after 20 years of marriage, and being an expat here in the US without any support, without a support system. It was extremely hard, and that's when I really felt less than. And for the first time in my life, I can say that I felt like a failure, and that was a huge dent on my confidence. And I had given up everything basically to raise my children, which was my choice, and I loved doing that. I loved the job as mum, as I had mentioned before. And I supported my husband's career, which as a wife, especially from the way I was raised, you follow the husband's career, which I did from country to country. And now I felt that I was stripped of everything and extremely isolated, wondering basically what in the world just happened. My life, I felt, did a 180-degree turn. And I actually joke with people, at least I can joke about it now, but I joke with people and I say that my life is like the Cinderella story, but in reverse. Oh, sorry, that's my dog. But the thing is, shortly after the divorce, the idea for my Powerhouse program came to me. And ironically enough, it was through my own teaching and my own curriculum that I began to get my confidence back. And, and I rose back up and I powered up again. And yeah, it was through the curriculum that I'd put together that happened. And but it's been an incredibly tough few years, I must say. And that really, I didn't like it. I didn't like feeling less than I was. I couldn't identify who I was. I hated losing that identity of, I knew exactly what I was doing. We had a very nice life, and then just being stripped from it, just everything been taken away, was devastating. But I'm glad I came through. Again, as I've said, I'm someone who perseveres. I have an unbreakable spirit, and that showed. That has shown over the past few years, and I'm glad to be where I am today.
I think your pup is also glad. I think they're hyping you there. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. What a journey, and I appreciate you being vulnerable in this moment to share that story with us. Kim, I'd love to pass it over to you.
So after suffering my stroke, I did rehab to start working after this was after I stroked. After a year, I went back into trying to get back to the workforce. But the only jobs that would hire me was being a paraeducator and filing and counting lunch money for the Howard County Public Schools in Maryland. And I found that so hard for me. It was very, very hard for me, because just having to think and count at the same time, though sounds very simple to do, is very challenging for me, especially at that time. And I had fourth graders, third graders look at me and be like, why is she taking so long? So that time was a very hard time for me, but through all that persistence, I just kept going on, did that. I became also a technician working in a PT clinic. And, it was just that with my therapy, all of it combined together, it was, I felt really beat down. I felt really vulnerable at that time, because I was trying so hard, but it just wasn't, it's just at that time, it felt like it wasn't enough, but then I looked at my girls and they reminded me every day that, you can do this. So with them helping me to relearn to read. My husband helping me walk again, learning how to walk while he was, how you use the leash on a dog. Yeah, people have that too. You have leashes for people to help them with their gait. So it was a lot, and I got through it. I did, as many, many years of rehab, many years of relearning. And, they say they don't, but they actually do in terms of hiring you, though, even though your resume looks so good. So they saw that, oh, she was a nurse prior to, then let's bring her in. Then when you start filling the application, they don't hire you because you write slow, you speak too slow. So there is some discrimination there. And being a woman, being Asian, being at that time, I was over my 30s, and it was hard for me because I knew the reason and they knew the reason why they wouldn't hire me. But, it was sad, but that drove me even more to fight even more and become better, to be strong.
Thank you for sharing that too. I mean, there's moments in both of your stories about like perseverance. And then even moments where I heard Jennifer, and even when you were sharing that, like the things you were telling others, you started to take in for yourself, and it started to help you too. And Kim, I see that in the way you were talking about, like even you being vulnerable with others around you to share like how you were moving through and navigating a new space. And thank you for shedding light on like the discrimination that could happen to folks who are just relearning to be themselves. Triana, I'm curious for you, have you ever felt vulnerable where you felt discrimination or felt less than, and how you handled that situation?
Oh, yes. I relate everything to pageantry just because that was the roller coaster of my life, quite honestly. A lot of people don't know, like I've mentioned before, but I was an athlete growing up. I went to college running track. And during that time span, my mother lost her job. And being a single parent, that's really hard to put your child through school, especially a D1 college, all while they've accomplished this huge dream of becoming a D1 athlete. So we dealt with this issue of being able to pay for school. And basically they were like, if you guys can't pay for this, then she's going to have to leave for the semester until you guys can pay your balance. And that's when I chose to do a pageant. The most random thing, even to this day, my mom was like, why was that your choice? But it worked. Okay, great. But I wanted to help her out because you win money. A lot of people don't know these pageants can consist of scholarship opportunities. And that was going to go towards my tuition. And getting ready for the pageant, that's when I developed Bridging the Great Cultural Divide. And that was created after someone had yelled out of a truck, basically, for me to go back to my country. And I stood there just kind of like in shock and awe that that's still something that we discuss to this day, that we even feel that we can yell at another person or even be comfortable enough to do that. And having the platform that I had to take to Miss Oklahoma and the amount of people that I could reach is whenever I chose, this is the topic I want to discuss, especially in a state like Oklahoma. And being African-American, Native American, and mixed with Caucasian as well, I thought that I could give a very unique perspective from it. I went into Miss Oklahoma and ultimately won, and that was $30,000 plus of scholarship money towards my student loans, and just amenities from there that added on, and the opportunity to go to Miss America. But despite how hard I worked and the nonprofit that I developed and the miles that I traveled and the networking that I did with tribal nations and just diverse communities across the state, there were still people who were not happy with the fact that I won. And I went through a huge phase of just being really angry and feeling less than, because the excuse that I won was because I was Black, or because I only mentioned tribal nations, or because the topic of race is such a big topic, then people will feel sorry for me, and that's why I should have won. And a note in there is that there's been 98 years worth of Miss Oklahomas, and I'm the third Native woman ever to become Miss Oklahoma. I'm the third African-American woman to ever become Miss Oklahoma, and there's also only been one Asian woman to become Miss Oklahoma out of 98 years. So if that puts it into perspective, what I had to kind of experience throughout that entire year. But I really went through feeling less than, because despite working incredibly hard, Bridging the Great Cultural Divide was developed off of my personal experiences. These were things that I went through, that I shared those stories so that other people could relate and not feel alone. So when you put somebody on a pedestal like that and you're like, wow, great job, you're making a huge impact, but then there's a whole crowd of people who are just not okay with it because just the topic alone is race. If you look at the situation as a whole, I am mixed. You know, the perspective that I have as a mixed woman is not going to be the same as the other women who are competing who are all Caucasian, because there's only two of us that are competing that are Black, and maybe one Asian woman in the competition as a whole. Our experiences are going to be completely different than the women that have been winning all throughout the 98 years. So yeah, I went through a roller coaster of emotions dealing with just being the third Black woman, third Native woman, and just discussing the topic of race, and was told multiple times that it was too rough of a topic to discuss. So let's go around it somehow. But long story short, I refused to do that throughout the entire year and faced a lot of scrutiny from crowds and whatnot, but kept it going. And it changed the direction, I would say, for the Miss Oklahoma community and for the Miss America community, because now you see pageants, all they do is talk about diversity and inclusion. So I'm not saying it's due to me, but it's just that we're becoming more comfortable with talking about diversity. And it just takes really one person just jumping out there and just saying, you know what, it's time. Let's go ahead and do it while we have this opportunity.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And, you know, I did not know that about the pageant community, but it really puts it into perspective. And a lot of times, even as women, sometimes we are the feeling of like being the only one or the first one or like the one to pave the path. Even as women, we can experience that, being the only woman in the room. That's happened to me on multiple occasions. And so I appreciate you kind of taking us through that history too. And I think hearing how all of you have kind of persevered through moments of discrimination or even moments of feeling incredibly vulnerable or less than, but still seeing that light, still getting moving toward that goal that you want. It's incredibly inspiring. There's a question from the audience about how we were talking a lot about how y'all are inspiring yourself, how you're empowering yourselves, how you're feeling confident in yourself. There's a question here around, how do you empower or motivate others, especially young girls? I'd love to ask anyone who feels moved to answer that first to go, and then if y'all want to hop in after each other, feel free.
Well, if I'd like to say something. I always talk about my martial arts background, and we have the 5 tenets of unbreakable spirit, perseverance, self-control, and courtesy, and I think I've just named 4 then. But I always, if a young person tells me they can't do something or they're going to give up, I always tell them that they have to keep trying. You got to keep trying. No matter how hard, no matter how many times you get knocked down. As the song goes, who is it? Is that Pink? You got to get up and try. You've got to keep going, and because if you don't, you're never going to achieve that goal. And like I said, I do that with my students, my own martial arts students. You know, from a low belt, from like a gold belt or an orange belt, they will receive they will have their black belts already hanging, so that at any point in time where they feel that they just can't, they're giving up, I'll say, look at the wall, look at your black belt, and that motivates them to continue going on. And I know it's hard, it can be hard, but that is, you know, perseverance, unbreakable spirit. You've got to keep trying in order to achieve success, and no matter what you're doing. You can't give up on the first time you're knocked down. In fact, you know, it just makes you stronger. It helps you to improve techniques, for example, to, just so I can't state that enough, that perseverance is key in achieving success. And so I try to, you know, get that across to any youngster that says, I give up, I can't do this. So.
So I myself think with especially having young girls, especially the younger you are, I feel the more vulnerable you are. And I think it's important that they understand that you're gonna have so many people make judgments about you, about who you are, your self-image, who you should look like, what you should be. But to me, it's all mindset. It's basically it's just you against you. Try to take out all the outside noise. And I know it's so difficult because everybody's always saying that, you know, you should do certain things, especially like your peers. But I think it's mostly important that you focus on you and not worry really about what other people think, because being young, it's hard. You have so much in life that people are pointing their fingers, and honestly, it's really about you. It's not about them, because at the end of the day, it's you who lives your life, not anybody else. You're not living it for them, you're living it for you.
When you're Miss Oklahoma, your crowd that you're initially put in front of is a lot of elementary schools, middle schools. I had the opportunity to really meet with an older crowd just because of the topic that I was discussing. But when it came down to meeting with the schools and having the discussion on how to inspire others or how do I keep going, what worked for me personally was telling those personal stories, because like I said, I kind of changed the direction of Miss Oklahoma that year to be something that's more personable and to really kind of be real. I'm kind of known for being like the real Miss Oklahoma, in the sense of that we talk about real life experiences no matter what the age is. And I've had a few discussions with kids before whether it was, I don't want to continue my life anymore, what do I do? Or I come from a household that is divorcing, parents are divorcing, you know, just the examples are just from simpler terms to some of the hardest things that you could possibly talk about. But what worked for me personally was giving my experiences in life, because most of the time people are afraid to discuss what they're going through because they don't know if people will be able to relate to it. So when you have someone who is traveling, or a Miss Oklahoma, especially the little girls who see the sparkly crown, and you know, when they hear that, oh, Miss Oklahoma struggles too, that opens so many different doors for them. So for me personally, it's been telling those stories, getting them comfortable to have someone to kind of be able to have a safe space with, you know. And throughout my life, you know, I've gone through poverty with my mother. I've gone through putting myself through college, or us working together to get me through college. Just the craziest stories. I could tell you what I've gone through, and to see where I'm at now, most people would be like, how did you keep going? And that's why I share those stories with people, because a lot of times I know for myself, I wish I had had someone to look up to, or someone that I could relate to. So my journey as Miss Oklahoma was always to be for others what I didn't have. And it's worked out throughout the years. Really, I never realized how many people just needed someone to be able to relate to. And now I get to see some of those kids. They still connect with me here and there through Snapchat or Instagram and Facebook, showing me like, oh, they graduated from high school, or they're on their way to college, working with the Boys and Girls Club. I did a lot of like inner city gatherings where, you know, the community was struggling, and maybe they weren't wanting to continue their education, or they were struggling and they were only in middle school. So now I see them on Snapchat and they're on their way to high school, they're on their way to college. So yeah, for me, what worked really well was just sharing those personal stories. You know, it's okay to be comfortable with it. Don't force anyone to do it, but just let them know like you're not the only one. This sparkly crown doesn't keep me from going through the ups and downs of life. Like I am still struggling to this day. You know, COVID-19 affected me as well in a lot of ways. Like Jennifer was saying, you know, we've all had to adjust. So yeah, that's what I would do for those who need a little inspiration of all ages. It's just sharing those personal stories.
Jennifer, did you have something to add? I thought I might have saw you lean forward.
I just agree with Triana. Those personal stories are something that they can identify with, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, it's a common fallacy sometimes that folks who are really confident in themselves or who are sharing their stories might not ever feel the vulnerability, the like less than, or like the feeling of like, oh, I'm still just trying too. I'm still moving through it, right? And so when you make that clear for folks and you share it in a way that is authentic to you, I think it's true. Like it gives people even words to tell their own story if they couldn't find the words themselves, or a moment to open up or to relate, where I think the empathy piece really then comes in to connect us. And it sounds like we're all really connected and have experienced similar things, even though we all really have just met, even on this call, right? So I know part of this call too, not just about the confidence building, about feeling empowered in ourselves. It's also about, we want to hear a little bit more about like, how do we trust our instincts, or how do y'all trust that instinct, right? And even what does your instinct mean to you? And so I want to frame it this way.
Sorry.
It's okay. So my dog also has a lot of, always wants to be on my conversations as well. But when it comes to trusting your own instincts, I'm wondering, what is it that y'all do for yourselves to really lean in and trust your instincts? How do you have that self-confidence to go for it, or like to advocate for yourself when an opportunity comes your way? Triana, I'd love to start with you.
Oh gosh. You know, really, I think it's kind of, I may have a unique perspective on it. Just the adversities that I've faced in life have kind of put me in this way that I've been able to overcome before. So why not just try? I'm kind of the person that says, you know what? Yeah, why not? Let's do it. For example, being an athlete throughout all of my years, and then one day going, oh, I'm going to try this pageant over here and see what will happen with that. I only wear Nikes, but that's okay. I'll try some heels real quick, you know. But that doesn't work for everyone. I've seen a lot of people, even within my own family, who are like, who say shoulda, coulda, woulda a lot. You know, I should have done that, I could have done that, or I would have done that. And I think because of what they've gone through and hearing what almost like the regrets they have in life for not pushing or trying something different, is what kind of inspired me to, no matter what opportunity is presented, that I just go for it. Just try it. I joke around with people that it was the year that I watched Yes Man with Jim Carrey, and how he said yes to almost everything. Well, he said yes to everything, but I learned from his mistakes, don't say yes to everything. And that's when life really started changing for me. You know, I can't remember exactly what it was, but something came forward and I said, okay, yeah, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it. Looked into it and said, okay, yeah, I'm going to try it. Next thing I knew was we were moving to Georgia, and jumped into, that's what it was. I jumped into a random pageant, had no idea, had no clothes for it really. And they said, can you sing for us? And I said, yep, sure, why not? Let's sing. And went out there and sang and, won the talent portion. It's just little things, from the smallest things to the biggest things. What I've done that's just really helped me over time is just to every opportunity that's presented, if it's fitting for your schedule, or if it's there, just try it. Just go for it. What's going to hurt? Don't have those shoulda, coulda, woulda moments. That's kind of like my life motto is shoulda done it, coulda done it, woulda done it. That's what I don't want to do. So basically the past few years, everything that kind of comes forward is like, hey, can you speak here? Hey, can you travel here? Hey, do you want to try acting? It's like, yes, let's go ahead and try it out. And of course, it doesn't always work out, but I'm still so happy that I did it.
I'll talk about this from a kind of a slightly different angle, because I do believe that I do trust my instincts, or my intuition, I would say. I know those two terms are interchangeable, and so I would say that I do trust my intuition, and I will go for it if I see an opportunity. But I understand it when people don't. I think it can be difficult for many to perhaps realize that maybe their intuition is speaking to them to do something, because the signals for intuition and instinct can be very different from person to person. The when I say the signals, it's things like, oh, that gut feeling that you should be doing something, or this hunch, or this nagging feeling that you should be doing something. But people don't recognize that as intuition, and they sometimes don't even question it. And but intuition it's an understanding that comes from deep within, that you can't necessarily explain to anyone else. It's knowing something without knowing why, basically. And it's your inner voice, I would say. The thing is, it's your inner voice, but one thing it's not, one thing it is, it's logical. It's not logical, and that's the problem here. Intuition is your inner voice. It's not logical, and because it's not logical, and because it cannot be explained, that many people choose to ignore it. And when you're making a really important decision in your life, you may feel a little foolish to admit that that decision was based on a hunch. Oh, I had a hunch, that's why I did it. We want evidence to support big decisions that we make, but our intuition is our inner guardian angel. And intuition actually comes from the word intuitio, or something like that, which means consideration. So we need to listen to that inner voice that we have. And when you trust yourself, because if you feel, I feel like I need to do this, I can feel it in my very gut that I need to do that. And when when the outcome is achieved, you feel really confident because you've trusted yourself, and so your confidence levels goes up. And that's whether you're talking about going for an opportunity or even stepping away from something that doesn't feel right. Always listen to your intuition. It's real. Pay attention to what your body is doing, to the mind, the body, and everything like that. So yeah, I think there is definitely a correlation to listening to your intuition and self-confidence.
I agree with both Shana and Jennifer. I definitely live with the notion of even the whole mantra of why not? Because, honestly, life is it's too short. You're not ever promised anything. So you should do everything and anything you can. I mean, physically, if you can't do it, but honestly, everything you should possibly do, because you don't want to ever think later on that, I should have. Going back with the intuition and actually having perspective, looking at things and actually, looking, not it being half empty or full, literally just looking at it as it's an opportunity. You have an opportunity to do things, embrace it. Just why not do it, because you can. And honestly, I go back to not being able to most anything, think, speak, or physically walking or even crawling. But I always believe that if you can't do it, do it. For those that can't do it, do for them. It's simple as that. I know it's simple to say, hard to do, but I think it's most important to, he agrees. I think it's important to just stop living life with what ifs and just start living lives with why not,
Thank you so much to all of you, Kim, Triana, Jennifer. I am just full of gratitude that I want to reflect back to you and also point you in the direction of the chat. There is gratitude for you in there. I definitely am taking with me this feeling of, I don't want to regret anything. I'm going to ask why not, and I'm going to listen to myself. I don't want to have I wish I could have done that, or I should have done that. And I think the other thing that y'all are really making clear for me is that hearing and being in community with folks like y'all, with folks who are on this call, listening in to hear more about how we empower each other and empower ourselves, it's also a part of that feeling of confidence. When you got your community around you, when you've got folks who are also working towards their own goals, I'm feeling like I want to hype all of you all the time so that you always feel like you can trust yourself and trust your voice because you've also got people cheering you on. I just want to take a moment for folks out there who are watching. If you want to put some gratitude in the chat or like share some love with our panelists for tonight for the stories that they gave and the experiences they shared with us, please do. And I just want to say thank you so much to folks who did spend time with us today. And for folks who are going to be watching this recording, thank you for also doing that. I'm going to pass it over to Sue Ann here to close us out.
Thank you so much. Amazing conversation, amazing women and women of strength. And that's what, that's what we wanted to show. And I think it's important to show representation. And we need to continue to show that women that are strong, that are taking charge of their lives, that they exist, and that we need to continue to show that, especially with our younger generation coming up. So with that, thank you everyone for your engagement. I appreciate it. I wanted to, again, thank you to our sponsors for the night, AARP, ADP, Walmart, and UPS. And tomorrow, just as a heads up, we are bringing in, we're talking about relationship capital tomorrow. It's all about bringing relationships and not beyond networking, but how do you leverage those relationships to help you? And so I think our conversation is going to be fantastic. And then Friday, we're going to go into intergenerational conversations, as well as then celebrating our Shiro. So I hope you'll join us tomorrow. And with that, thank you so much, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care.